Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you. My name is Hitendra Wadhwa, and you are in Intersections. This is episode 2, and our focus here at Intersections is to really integrate life and leadership to bring together various streams of wisdom and insight that will allow us to dissolve boundaries and to approach our full potential again in life as much as in leadership. Today, it is a very special pleasure for me to have with us a wonderful guest who will be illuminating us in many ways on a topic I think close to many of our hearts. Before I get to really talk about this whole theme of maximizing people's potential in today's time, which is what we're going to be talking about, let me introduce to you our guest for today, Raghu Krishnamoorthy. Raghu is the ex-Chief Human Resource Officer of GE. He's had a storied career at GE over a number of years. Prior to that, he has been, for example, the CHRO of GE Aviation, the CHRO of GE Healthcare, the Chief Talent Officer, head of Crotonville, the Leadership Development Center. He has been named as one of the top 50 Asian Americans in the world of business in the recent past. And Raghu is also someone who is an insatiable, curious learner all the time. And so one of the things that Raghu's done in recent days is, in fact, to enroll in the doctoral program at University of Pennsylvania, where he is now, having practiced and lived and experienced leadership, he is now learning leadership and studying and exploring the frontiers of leadership. I want to use this moment before I, even bring Raghu on, just to kind of welcome all of you as well to this moment and invite you to use the chat window to just start commenting, start sharing, tell us where you're signing in from today, and let's just start building our community. And as we do that, I invite Raghu into our mix as well. Raghu, warm welcome. Thank you for joining us.
And Hitendra, thank you very much. And thank you everyone on the chat. It's a real pleasure to be with you. These are times when things are very dark for all of us, right? For instance, in Chicago today, there's going to be 6 inches of snow. It's the sign of times. And there is a huge need for all of us to have a sense of belonging, and not just belonging, actually a sense of mattering. By including me in this platform, I feel that I matter, at least a little bit for the moment. And I'm grateful to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Raghu. I'm going to bring you back in just a minute to have us talk about the theme for the day, right? And so our focus today is going to be to create this intersection of head and heart, to recognize that all of us, as you're saying, Raghu, are facing challenging times. And perhaps the greatest of those challenges is the kind of really heart-rending trade-offs we sometimes have to make between family and work, between safety and security, between kind of earning a livelihood versus really living a life. And I know this is an area that you and I have had some very stimulating conversations on about your perspective. I want to bring you in to that very soon. Before I do that, before we get into dive into that topic, let us take just a minute here to acknowledge, right, who we have the opportunity to be engaging with and talking with today, right? And so I'm going to show you another slide, guys, right? So this is Raghu being congratulated by his alma mater, where he did his MBA. This is, for those of you who don't know, is India's top MBA program. IIM, the Indian Institute for Management in Ahmedabad, right? A very privileged, school to be able to get into and go to and graduate from and be an alum of. And Raghu, so you had this storied academic and professional career. I imagine that the roots of this must have come from a very young age when people recognized the inner genius in Mr. Raghu.
So fast, Hitendra, not so fast. My past has been less glorious than what you make out to be. When I was a child, I was an extremely poor student. In fact, I barely managed to scrape through from class to class. But there was a point in time when I had to make a call. I had to make a call whether I'm going to stand still or move forward. And it is one of life's intersections, right? When you are faced with the fact that you could be the last in the class, You could be the person who's going to be coughing and spluttering your way through a career. And that's a moment of realization that dawned on me that I need to do something better. And I was fortunate. I had the ability to go into a premier institution. I had great support from my parents. So it was a transition, not necessarily an easy path, but I'm grateful for what happened. And therefore, I'm grateful for my alma mater and my companies that I worked for, so that they have given me a perspective in life and they've enabled me to take on a journey which I feel has been really privileged and blessed.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. It's a great testament to the power of what we call the growth mindset. That regardless of where we are at a certain moment in our career and our life, who knows what the full hidden untapped potential there is in one of us, right? In any of us. And with even where you reach, the fact that at this stage you're engaging in the next level of reinvestment in your intellectual and professional sort of life through the doctoral program is another example of that. Who knows where you're going to be 5 years from now, right? I mean, it's beautiful. So let's turn to one dimension of who you are, which is I've had the privilege of having you in my class at Columbia Business School. And one thing I noticed very early in your interactions with my class is that whereas in my case, my aspiration in the class is to build a close-knit community by getting to have everyone unified under one, in a sense, like energy, right? And that's the energy that all of us are sort of like experiencing as a kindred and connected spirit. In your case, I noticed that you actually did something really beautiful in getting to form that same connection by doing the exact opposite. And so this is a beautiful intersection that is happening right here. And that opposite thing that you did was to actually walk around the room, get to know as many of the students as you could in the breaks, prior to the class, at the end of the class, and then interweave and integrate that comment from that person, that story from that person, that concern or issue from that person, etc., as though you have known them always at an individual one-on-one level. That to me was remarkable as a quality that you possess of being really attuned at the very human level with every individual in the room. So now, whereas academically perhaps you've grown over time, is this quality of caring and compassion and just like curiosity and concern about people, is that not something that just people have or don't have? I mean, like, where did it sprout out in you?
I can't really answer the question whether people have it. I certainly can say in my case, I learned it. I'm going to give you an example of what happened to me a few years ago. I was in the C-suite and we had made some really tough calls about the organization. We had decided to lay off many people. We had decided to sell some businesses. We had decided to restructure the organization dramatically and drastically. And we had done all this, announced it publicly to our employees, to the media, to our investors. And there was a positive reaction, at least from the external world. But what we had forgotten to realize was that the emotions in the organization were still very heavy. Soon after the announcement, we went to actually have a panel discussion with our employees, and all hands to all the employees across the world. And what I noticed was when we went through the panel discussion, me and my team members on the panel were actually celebrating the fact that we have done what we said we would do, and we're perhaps joking around with each other. That did not go well with our employees, because while we had moved on to the next level, the employees were still heavy with the information that many of their jobs are going to go away, they're going to get restructured, and they were not able to recognize the fact that, hey, the folks in the senior level perhaps are at a different plane. And we were not able to appreciate the fact that these folks still needed time to really appreciate, digest, come to terms with what was happening to them. And I realized at that point in time, when I came back, that we had missed the mark completely. And from there on, what I've tried to do is be in the shoes of the employees, actually try and listen to them very deeply. Because when you listen deeply, life unfolds before you. And you recognize and realize that people are looking at the world through their lens. And unless you look at their world through their eyes, you're not going to be an effective leader. You may be holding the position, but you're not going to inspire them and engage them. So that made me realize that I had to actually get to know people first before I do anything else. Earn their trust, be in their shoes, empathize with them so that you are in a position to frame your reference according to what they need, not according to what you have.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a powerful story. I really appreciate your sharing that, Raghu. Let's take a minute just to understand this audience, right? Just along with the quest we're on in understanding our people. So here are just just a few flavors for the kinds of folks that we have joining us today. Amy from San Antonio, Texas. Valerie from Trinidad and Tobago. Joseph from Florida. Anna from New York City. Anna, hang on in there till the end of the show, all right? Because I'm going to talk about what we're going to do next time. And there's a personal journey, a story that you have been really inspiring to me and many other, Columbia students on, which is something I'd like to feature as part of that. So it's not that we will have you participate, today, by dictate from me, but by the next Thursday conversation. There's a conversation I want to have with you. So thank you for joining us as well. Mauricio from Sao Paulo. It is a great joy to have this global village, connect with us today. My encouragement to all of us who are tuning in is to share this with your community in the social media that you're coming from, YouTube, Facebook, so that we can, have others in your community as well tune in today if they are interested in this live conversation we're having here with you, Raghu. So let's turn to the heart of our conversation. We, are in a state of siege as managers, as leaders, as parents, as professionals, as human beings. And there are just so many different factors that seem to have come together in creating this perfect storm. Raghu, when you think about the uniqueness of the challenges that are being foisted on us today, what are some of those dimensions of that challenge? Let's just take a minute or so to just get commonly grounded into the challenges that we face today, both in work and in life. What are some of those key ones for you?
Let me start with something really personal, Hitendra. I'm in Chicago. I have two daughters who live in New York City. I haven't seen them over the last 3-4 months. And as New York becomes a hotspot for COVID-19, one thing me and my wife really miss is not having our children with us. They're grown up, but still they are our children. And if I only had the ability to reach out and hug them, I'd be so grateful to God right now. And that's something we regret every day, not having them here with us. And I'm sure many people are experiencing that. Of course, many people's burdens are a lot more than mine, or for that matter, yours. We are lucky. But as people navigate through a world that is going very dark, the tunnel that is very dark, with not necessarily knowing what's going to come out at the end of the tunnel, I think it's weighing heavily on everybody's minds. So the fact that people have lost jobs, there's a dual crisis happening right now. There's a health crisis and an economic crisis. And both are in an exponential context, and both are actually having opposite curves. So as people go through navigating both these extremes, they're trying to make sense of what's really happening, what's happening with reference to our jobs, what's happening with reference to our health, what is going to happen to our loved ones, how are we going to navigate through this, what are governments going to do, what are organizations going to do, where does that leave me? So it's a profound pause. And hopefully it moves from a pause to becoming a positive reset. But we don't know that. So when the unthinkable becomes thinkable, life is altered, and we are going through a life-altering moment right now.
By the way, folks, one of the things you will see with Raghu is that he has very quotable quotes, and he just kind of like makes them up in the moment. I don't know how you do it, Raghu, but this idea that when will we go from the pause to the positive? Yeah. I love that, right? From the pause to the positive. That's beautiful. Let me turn it to you guys, right? Like, what are the challenges that you are seeing unique, to your people and to yourself Any things that you want to elaborate on and share with us? Again, just as a way to ground the conversation so that we then start moving it forward. From the standpoint of people and productivity and having everyone at our fullest potential, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing? Let's start hearing from you in the chat window. And as you do, I'm going to say hello to a couple of folks. Marshall, you have been on my mind. I remember that moment at the British Airways, terminal at Heathrow. And I remember that in all the joy that I was having in connecting with you there, I think I was so enthusiastic about the conversation that I wasn't paying attention to the fact that you were, I think, getting late for your flight. And it's been on my mind to write to you to apologize for not being attentive to the fact that I think you needed to head out. And so I hope you made your flight. And it's a pleasure to have you here today. Okay, so here are some of the things we are hearing. Edison is saying, the timing to start a new business, is certainly, highly impacted. Todd, you're talking about how do you choose, between work and family right now? That becomes even more of a very kind of like powerful, kind of like trade-off and challenge when you think about those people who are putting their health at risk by going on the front lines to do all the noble work that they are doing. Andrea is talking about how, working with people who are really stressed and worried and who express that sometimes by lashing out, by being angry, not that they intend to be, but it's just kind of like, how they're coping with their emotions in that moment. Elaine is talking about, how important it is to, that touch, that importance of touch, which we've had when we've been in a position to be engaged with people. By the way, Elaine, to your point, I flew back from New York to India just around the time that things were starting to go real crazy in the world. But when I came to India asked me to be quarantined. And, I also wanted to be mindful and attentive. And so here I am in this home, right, with my wife and daughter, and I have to maintain social distancing. I can't hug my daughter. My inability to hug my daughter, my heavens, it was so constrictive for 14 days. So I'm with you, about that. Carmen, you're saying, what do you do when you're furloughed? Is it real that we are actually going to come back? When the world actually seems to have just totally shut down. Abu is saying, hi, Raghu. So good to hear from you after a long time. So you're meeting old friends here, Raghu. What would be the new way of working as social distancing?
I do want to react. Carmen. I think Carmen has a very interesting point. What do you do when you're furloughed, right? And some organizations are doing some very interesting things right now. And I do believe that it's a way of thinking about and framing the issue. Virgin Atlantic, for instance, what they have said to their employees in UK is many of these flight attendants are trained in emergency care. So they have followed their employees, but what they have told NHS, which is the National Health Service there in UK, saying that our employees are trained. If any of them are willing to volunteer to help out, would you accept them? And NHS came back and said, absolutely. Most of the employees who have followed accepted that opportunity because they had something to offer to the world during times like this. And NHS was a perfect opportunity for them to display their skills. I think what is great in times like this is for organizations to move beyond skill maximization to some kind of a moral elevation, which will at least keep people whole during times when they are furloughed.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I think it's a good time for us to move beyond the challenge to some of the kind of solutions and ideas that Carmen's question has, I think, triggered for you, Raghu. So let me just quickly summarize, just what I see from your conversation and the chat, right, as some of the dimensions of the challenge, because, I think it just is valuable for us to pay homage to the fact that this is a moment like no other in our generation. And I say our generation, everyone from millennials to boomers, we're all one generation right now with regard to this, right? A, there is this massive economic collapse. B, there is this massive uncertainty about the future. We don't know, how long this is going to last and whatever. C, there's a global health crisis, this pall of gloom as to when, will this potentially come and hit my family or me, right? D, there is this sense of, I would also say, let me throw that in, a sense of concern that the institutions we have trusted, the leaders we have trusted, the experts we have trusted, right now we cannot really even lean on them. I mean, who is the figure who is holding a hand and going to make us walk through and out of this crisis? There is a sense that we really don't know, who to turn to for that reassurance and guidance, out of this. And then we have to be working from home. And then it's not that home has become the office, the home has also become the school. And now our kids are home as well. And those who were used to, for example, the care and love and support of domestic help, many of us don't even have access to that anymore. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, Raghu. So you have mentioned one path out of this, which is the path of an uplifting meaning, an uplifting purpose. And you gave this beautiful example of Virgin here. And you mentioned that, look, at a time like this, there is, what do you call it? An elevation of the model.
The whole thing is, are we looking for getting the best out of our employees? Or are we looking at getting the most of our employees? Organizations that look at getting the best out of their employees are the ones that are likely to recover the fastest.
And one of the ways to get the best, you're saying, is infuse them with a great sense of meaning and purpose for the moment. One of the things that reminds me as a principle, from the work that we do at Mentora Institute, Raghu, you've been an honored sort of contributor to that work as well, is the energy of purpose. And one of the key lessons in that energy of purpose is that don't get stuck with a certain goal. Because as conditions change in the world, you may need to revise your goals. Your core purpose stays the same, to be of service in a way that is unique to the gifts and strengths that you bring, but the outer expression of that purpose may need to constantly adapt to the moment. So there might be a moment in human history where Virgin employees have to do X, Y, and Z, and there is this new moment in history where for a certain period of time, they may need to do A, B, and C, right? That capacity to fluidly pivot the goals while still staying true to some core purpose of relevance and service to the world, right? Isn't that sort of, I think, maybe a lesson we can learn from that?
Yeah, I think very clearly, because I'm wondering loudly whether it's time for us to start thinking more about meaning than mission, because mission has a destination. When we are unclear about the destination, all we can do is make sense of here and now, and that's more meaning. What is it that I can think of now that makes some significance, makes a difference today? And that's all we can do. Today, I was reading about an old 99-year-old man in UK. His name is Tom Moore. He's a World War II veteran. What he decided to do at his age was walk 100 laps around his garden to raise money for NHS. And by doing so, he raised $15 million. So even a man who's 99, if he has the determination, can make a difference in times like this. At his age, he's going to be close to 100. So I think those are stories that inspires us, saying that everybody has a moment to make meaning and make a contribution in times like this. It's not easy. It's not easy, especially when you're worried about a meal on the table or issues of children's school or your health. You are not thinking about higher level, higher order issues like Maslow's hierarchy. But the point here is, I think what we are witnessing is a moment in our lives where the social solidarity is coming to play a lot more effectively than the individualism. So I'm actually quite optimistic about the residue effects of what we are going through. But what we are going through is still very, very heavy and difficult for most of us.
Frederick is asking, the coronavirus crisis put teachers into distant learnings for the students, which is a wholly different mode of interaction. Suggestions. Frederick, we're going to come back to that. I'm going to come back and probe Raghu on sort of what this new form of human dynamic means when we're all working from home. Before we get there, though, I want to sort of like pose kind of like another challenge, right? Which is, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, if you're an owner of a small business, etc., there is today this really, heart-rending situation that you are thrust in, which is that you've got to make decisions which are right for the business, which are right for the organization. You cannot run the risk of driving the organization to the ground at a time when, let's say, business has screeched to a halt. On the other hand, how can you, do that, right? When you actually find that some of these things that you will do will inflict pain, on your people. and will result in things like what we're seeing some of our friends talk about here, furloughs and perhaps layoffs and etc. Right? And so Raghu, when we're talking here about maximizing people's potential, really engaging and respecting the humanity, in our teams and organizations, how does one do that when one is having to make some of the harshest human resource decisions today?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something that I did not do right. In the late 90s, when Asia went through the financial crisis, I was looking after many parts of Asia. One of the countries I was responsible was Thailand. And the Thai baht devalued overnight, and we had to lay off thousands of employees. In fact, that period, I had to lay off about 2,000, 3,000 employees. In Thailand alone, I had to lay off about 800 employees. I remember doing that. I was still a young HR professional, and I was very keen on impressing my leaders with what I knew and how I could do things like that. So I put a total Six Sigma plan of how to lay off employees. We had everything planned. I went on the day when we were supposed to lay off. In the morning, we started calling people in, handing them the equivalent of pink slips. In the afternoon that day, I heard sirens come in. And I was really getting distracted because as we were trying to do what we needed to do, the sirens came closer and closer. In fact, actually, the sirens stopped outside the door. And then I went to inquire what really happened. At that moment, one of my colleagues told me that an employee that I had laid off earlier that day couldn't bear the thought of going back home without a job. And he jumped out of the 6th floor window to try and commit suicide. And I must say that that took the wind out of my bag. For a minute, I realized that it was the fact that I was doing this wrong. People, especially in those days, even now, were making difficult choices between livelihood and life. And in most cases, livelihood was life. And if you didn't have livelihood, this particular gentleman thought he wouldn't have a life. And he had a family. Fortunately for us, he fell on the awning and he was seriously injured, but he didn't die. A few days later, my manager called me up and he gave me my performance appraisal. And for the first time and the last time in my life, I got a development needed on my appraisal, which is the lowest you can get on my appraisal. And my manager told me, if you didn't take care of this situation, if God forbid, if the individual had expired, that would have been haunting us forever in our lives. You were responsible for making sure that you not only took people out the way the organization wanted you to do, but also did it with grace. And you did not show grace. And this is a lesson that you need to learn from here. So my lesson from that point onwards was, sometimes we have to do the tough things, right? We have to take tough actions. But if you don't do it with humanity, with humility, understanding the situation, understanding what it means for the other person, you perhaps are not going to be relevant in your profession as a professional. On the contrary, I read something that inspired me 2 days ago. This is a restaurant owner in Tennessee. He had to lay off a lot of his employees. But when he did that, he also told them, listen, I know this is going to be difficult times for you. Here is what I'm going to do for you. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm going to have the chefs come in and prepare food. Those of you who need it can come and pick up the food anytime you want to. What it told me was, he had to do the difficult thing, but he allowed employees to have that dignity, saying that I'm still here for you, and hopefully when the lights come on, I'll have you back. But meanwhile, this is the limited offering I can give you in times like this. I think we need to really think through how we come through as individuals, as leaders, because if you look at the definition of leaders, it is about how do you expand other people? How do you make others' lives better? And this is the moment we are really tested for that.
Yeah, that's thank you. Those are two really beautiful and powerful stories, Raghu. Really appreciate you opening up on something which must have for you been a remarkable sort of shock, but also then over time growth. The second story you shared about the restaurant owner reminds me of a alum from Columbia Business School who shared the story. He leads his family business, and he said after many decades we had to finally do some layoffs. This is not in coronavirus times, this is a few years ago. We had to do some layoffs because it was just necessary for the survival of the business, and we'd never done layoffs. It was heart-rending for us to take people from our family and invite them to leave. And he said, but we had to do it, for the future, and etc. And he said, what I did at that time is I went to each of the managers who had to lay some of their people off. And I told them that today, that is what you're going to do. But here is what you're going to do in 3 months from now and 6 months from now. I want you to reach out to each of the people that you had to lay off in your team. And I want you to invite them out for lunch, one-on-one, go and have a lunch with each of them. And when you do, check in on them. How are they doing? How has life progressed for them? How has their work search gone for them? And is there anything that you can do or we can do practically, right, within the confines of our resources to be of some service to them? And he said, that just gave me, just so much more of a sense of peace, even though it was a painful move to do. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I'm noticing in your stories and in this story is that we have to break ourselves out. I wonder what you think of this, Raghu, of a mindset, which is that, we can either be loving and nice and kind and happy, or when times get tough, and we have to make a decision on who to let go versus who to keep, who to promote versus who to not, who to give a bonus to versus who to not, etc. That clearly the people who are not going to get any of this, they are not going to like me. And so I should withdraw my heart. When I have conversation with them, engagement with them, I should bring security guards and I should do this. I should withdraw my heart because clearly they're not going to like me. And I think like one of the things that one sees in some of these stories is that there's no reason to think that way. There is research done by one of my colleagues, Joel Brockner at Columbia Business School, a professor, right? Where what it shows is that in situations like this or restructuring, etc., employees are much more likely to support management if they feel the process has been fair to them, even if the outcome was negative to them. So if some of them had to leave, even those people will be more at peace with the outcome and will support management what they did, as long as they understand the logic of the process. What do you think about this idea, Raghu? Because I'm only kind of a researcher on this. You are a living practitioner of this. What do you think of this idea that journey that we're talking about begins from within? It begins from a place which says, do not withdraw your heart, even in the toughest of moments.
Again, it reminds me of another story. You learn through life's hard knocks. And as an HR manager, oftentimes you encounter situations where you end up making some hard trade-offs. I remember one instance when we went through the Great Recession, we actually had to cut a lot of costs. And me and the CEO and made sure that we cut out every conceivable cost, right? Some of them big ticket items, some of them really small ticket items. One of the items we cut off was, of course, fruits in the office, but another one was flowers. We cut off all flowers in the office. It's going to save us about $700 a month. But in times like this, we need to set an example, and every penny counts. So we cut off flowers. And this happened on a Wednesday. And I was coming back to the office on Thursday and Friday. Thursday, I didn't see flowers. Friday, I saw flowers back. And on Monday, I saw the flowers back again. And this time I got very furious. I said, how dare the organization defy our instructions of not having flowers? We are cutting costs. We need to show the world that we are tightening our belts. And what ended up happening was I told my assistant, bring the person who's guilty. And 2 hours later, she brought me the person. A tiny lady who was our janitor. So Tony is her name. So Tony came into the room and I asked Tony, didn't you read the memo? Didn't you see the fact that we are cutting costs? And how dare you ask the florist to bring the flowers again? She paused for a minute, thought about it, and looked at me in my eye and said, actually, those are not flowers from the florist. These are flowers from my home. I bought them. And the reason I bought them is I know that the company is going through a very tough phase. I know that you folks are working very hard. And I thought the least I can do is put those flowers so that sometimes if you have the time, if you have a minute, you can stop and smell the flowers. Because what is flowers? It's a symbol of hope. And I thought I'll give you a little bit of a boost by putting those flowers so that you have hope and you need it. She walked away with that statement. I never felt more ashamed in my life. Because I know we have to cut things, we have to manage our budgets and whatnot, but the symbols of hope and motivation that people look for need to be there. Because without that, there is no life. Without heart, a leader is a tyrant, right? So I think for us to be effective leaders, the lesson I learned from Tony was you got to be a better human first before you're a better leader.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Raghu. I want to acknowledge a couple of the things that are happening in the chat window. Angela, you were asking very soul-searching questions. Do you think that this pandemic experience is encouraging us to become more united and one as a family? And then here's another one from you. It's one thing to think of the individual potential, which is important, but how can this pandemic facilitate and evolve towards the realization of our species-wide potential? My invitation to you, Angela, is to join us for further webcasts here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, because the topics that you're talking about are very close to my heart. I know, Raghu, they're very close to your heart as well. And we are going to continue to provide a stream of programming stimulated by the conditions of our time, right, as they evolve. And those two questions that you've just raised are going to be part of it, right? So while today the topic is a little bit more sort of at that pragmatic level of here on the ground, what can we do as managers, as let's say parents, as leaders, to bring out the best, in the people around us, practically speaking, in challenging times. Many of the things you're talking about here and these, soul-searching questions are things that I am very much intending to have as topics for this program going forward. One of which is going to be, who's responsible for coronavirus? All right. Who is responsible for coronavirus? That is going to be one of the topics in a session very soon. All right. In the meanwhile, I also want to, recognize that, Raghu, that you are really resonating with a lot of people. Here is Pradeep talking about how really great that you're able to share your experiences. Thank you for doing that. Shanti's talking also about the same thing. Thank you for sharing your experiences, really relevant to the current times. And so I'm grateful for that. Raghu, next thought, I think maybe that we should take. Let's get really, really practical about it, right? So here we are, and let's say I'm managing a team and they're all sitting at home, right? I mean, that's the new normal. And yet, is it really normal? It is true that businesses have, with remarkable speed, embraced Zoom and moved into a work from home situation. I was just talking to one of our clients in the tech space, and they mentioned how they just took a hard look at what was happening in various geographies, realized that the world was going to get into a lockdown mode very soon. And 4 days before some major lockdown news started to get announced by various governments, in 4 days before that, they had anticipated, planned, and executed the move of 100,000 people from the offices and service centers to working from home. I mean, that is a remarkable adaptation for a business to make at such scale. So that said, is it really working? Or, is there more that we need to do to be sensitized to some of the unique situations and challenges that we are thrusting our people into when they have to work from home?
It's a great question. I think for a long time, working from home was an employee benefit, right? And people chose. And then more recently, of course, it's become an organizational necessity. As long as it's an organizational necessity and people have an option to go back to the office, I think we'll still be in a position to manage this. However, if many CFOs, and they're thinking about this now, make this a productivity initiative and take this for granted, then we are stuck. You're right. Hitendra, you're right in terms of the fact that organizations that are entrenched in bureaucracies overnight have been able to pivot quickly and make this happen, right? So things that you cannot do, if you imagine if you were to try and institute working from home, you have to get the IT guys agreed, you have to go to the board, you have to get the employees to agree. But we have been able to do that very quickly. Same thing has happened on empowerment. Since you cannot control from the top, hierarchy has become hierarchy. So you are now have to empower people. There's no other option. So under such circumstances, it is good as a response for now. But long term, I want us to reflect deeply. There is a story about an organization Nicholas Bloom, who's done a lot of research from Stanford University, shared this story. It's an organization that invited about 1,000 of its employees to work from home and said, whoever wants to work from home can do so. 500 of those people opted to work from home. After 6 months, they asked the same question again. Only 40% agreed to remain at home. The balance 60% actually wanted to come back to office. And there are several reasons for this. At least in my case, home is my inner sanctum. It is the place I am who I am. And for office to come into that space, you are looking not just the fact that you have the work come in, but in some cases, as somebody pointed out on chat, some supervision and surveillance come in as well. My question is, as long as you choose for it to come in, it's voluntary. But if it is imposed on you, you actually have an unwanted guest at home. And we have to think twice about making that happen, because your home is your temple. That is where you and your family receive the warmth, the connection, and also it's the place where you have your dreams and aspirations embodied there. It's symbolic, it's complex. Working from home means that you are actually imposing a formality to the whole equation. And that for me is a huge issue for work-life balance, because what ends up happening is work may end up taking precedence in a context where you have children, where your partner is also working, and unfortunately, it upsets the whole balance. If organizations are willing to make life-work balance take dominance over work-life balance, then it's okay. On the other hand, if they impose it on everyone, it's going to backfire. And we have to think through very carefully before we institute as a policy.
Thank you, Raghu. A lot of thought-provoking comments there. I want to have you react to a video that I was just preparing us for a second, right? And so this is something that became famous, right? I think you may have seen it, a few, I think it was years ago, right? So here goes.
And the question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals? And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's quite
My apologies.
what's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies.
Okay, so this happened, right? I mean, do you remember this, Raghu? Did you see that? And
yes, I do.
What's really interesting is like it became like really kind of in some ways heart-rending and amazing, like very human, right? Very human and humorous. And today this is happening to everyone.
Right.
Today this is happening to everyone. What I found interesting in that, Raghu, is if you notice the body language and the tone, of the news broadcaster who was interviewing and the professor, right, who was being interviewed, they both seem to be so out of their comfort zone with regard to what happened, as though the implicit message was, this is terrible, it shouldn't happen, it is compromising the experience of what we are going through, right?
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Do you have any lesson or message for us today as to when home starts to blur and intermingle with work, which you and we're seeing that all the time right now, isn't it? I mean, and I'm sure so many of our friends here as well, these moments where you're at home and kids start to come into the screen and sit in your lap and etc. Is there a shift there that we need to make in some of the kind of like expectations and dynamics and all of that?
No doubt about that. I think the realization for me, at least, is the fact that life takes priority. You keep in mind, what's very clear is going through a phase like this, if you look at the wider meaning that this event is teaching us, is work as a concept shrinks in comparison to rest of the issues that you need to worry about. So organizations need to understand and appreciate that, and they're doing that. In all fairness, I think there is far more acknowledgement of the fact that family is going to become part of the frame of the camera in the equation. And keep in mind, here is some statistics you need to know. And a report came out from our labs about remote working. If you really look at people who work from remote office or from home office often, they're actually the senior people. Those people who have the ability of having a private space or having a separate office space where they are undisturbed. Most people don't have that luxury. They actually have to end up coming to work because of the fact that it gives them a different terrain, and there they're able to concentrate. That terrain goes away, and now you're working from home. It's on the bed or on the dresser. It all intermingles, and you have to be careful about making sure that you acknowledge the boundaries and allow the employees to separate the boundaries. These are some new competencies that are required. In fact, one of my researches right now I'm doing is that what are competencies required for people to permanently work from home, and what are competencies that managers need to display in having people work from home. So my lesson is we got to make sure that we acknowledge the limitations of people working from home and take that as a factor of what it means for our work and productivity.
That's beautiful, Raghu. I'm very inspired by what you're actually just talking about. I want to actually, build on that with a couple of thoughts. And I'm also reading what some of our friends are saying here online about their own war stories about blending family with work. But just in the spirit of, again, just sharing what's happening in the community, in the world, more broadly, in a shift of consciousness, right? Here are a couple of other videos that our production team was kind enough to kind of provide to us. So let me just share these with you. I think, for our viewing pleasure, we can all enjoy these human moments at work.
Hi everyone, I thought I'd do a quick video update for midweek rather than trying to schedule it. Jesus. Hi everyone, I thought I'd do a quick video update for.
All right, that was one. Let me share another one, which I think is also pretty cool.
Hi everyone, I thought I'd do a quick video update for midweek rather than trying to schedule it.
Home. Check this out, you guys are gonna love this. A little toddler already wanting to be just like mom. Look at this. She sets up her own workstation with a laptop, phone, even the reading glasses.
Yes.
The glasses are perfect.
Well, I put a bump into the pop.
That's what's happening. She's just typing away, looking adorable, got the glasses on. She's extremely busy and important, and she is brightening up our day.
So sweet things are happening. And one of the ways that actually, puts joy into my heart, Raghu, is, I've often felt over the years that there is such an artificial divide, that we have made between life and leadership, between public and private, between home and work, as if we have to dress in a certain way and come to work and comport ourselves in a certain way. And then we can kind of go back and kind of be ourselves, right? And here we are finding it's impossible to separate those two worlds. Maybe subtly so, there is a shift of consciousness that will happen. And there is a greater amount of humanity that will come into our, into our work consciousness as well.
Yeah, let me react to that. I think I have a sister who's a school teacher, and one of the things she told me was when a child comes to the school, especially younger children, they are not just coming there to study, but they are bringing with them their nutritional issues, their abuse issues, and so on and so forth. And unless a leader recognizes that into their thinking, or a teacher does that, the teacher is not going to be effective in communicating the lesson plan. I think the same thing holds true for leaders. Even when we get back to office working, I think hopefully we'll appreciate the fact that anybody who comes into the door is not coming, leaving their family behind, leaving their issues behind. They're coming with them. And how do you factor that into the workspace? Just like employees are factoring work into their living space. We need to become a lot more conscious of what that means for work-life balance going forward. What does it mean for diversity going forward? I think it's a profound moment. I think we are not, the good news is we've gone through the mechanics and we have taken some reflex action quickly. Now is the time for us to actually pause and reflect, not just act on reflections, so that we are in a position to use this movement as a learning opportunity going forward. We did not do much of that in 9/11. One parallel I have is 9/11, because after 9/11, the world went through again a similar process where altruism was at its peak, volunteerism was at its peak, but we forgot that soon after in fact, about a year. Hopefully this time around, we will all collectively learn from what we're going through.
That's beautiful. You shared here about like the shifts in the winds that may be even shaped by inclusion, and what's happening there. And here's Angela talking about we all being ourselves and all our issues with us everywhere we go. We're not machines that can turn on and off. Different parts of ourselves, right? That's a beautiful way of expressing this idea of your whole self. Coming all the time and engaging with work. I want to share one other piece of news which I think we'll all find interesting, and this is about what's happening. What's happening in the world. And so I was talking about how leaders have been struggling with how to really brew confidence, right, in us about their ability to understand and lead us, through a time like this. And here's a fascinating article in Forbes about the countries that seemingly are having the best coronavirus responses seem to all have women leaders. Maybe there's something there. I certainly encourage all of us to read this article if you haven't read it. It's got some really fascinating points in it. One of them was, for example, the Prime Minister of I think it was Denmark, if I have it right, basically holding a news conference on television that was exclusively for children. No adults were allowed there. She just wanted to hear from children on what their concerns and issues were at a time like this, because she was their leader, just like she was the adults' leader. We never talked to the children, right? What a beautiful idea, right? And coming from someone who's probably a mom, right, if I recall, and who has probably attuned herself, right, to playing that role for all the kids of her country. I thought that was really inspiring.
Can you imagine, for instance, right now, I saw a note about what do we do for children coming to office day, right? This is the time when most organizations have a day when the children come and visit the office. What if we were to do something similar? What if the CEO of the company or the manager of the team says, I'm going to have a conversation with all your children? What kind of an impact that would have in terms of the employees feeling the broader reach of the organization, and the organization and the leadership enveloping the larger family?
Beautiful, Raghu. Here are some comments which are, by the way, guys, thank you so much for all your sharing. I know you're also appreciating each other sharing there. This video is going to live on in YouTube and in Facebook Live, and so you should be able to access it later if you like, if you missed some of the chat that is going on, because I think it's invaluable as well. A lot of thoughts, ideas, and wisdom being expressed there. Here's a comment from Raj, and he's saying, hey, listen, you also missed the health minister of Kerala, this economically very advanced state in India that has done remarkable things in actually being really ahead of the curve on coronavirus. India is doing some, I think, pretty remarkable things itself, but Kerala in particular is quite ahead. And you're telling us that actually the health minister there is a lady. Thumbs up. That is powerful. And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name right, but if I were to call you Jens, right, I hope I'm somewhere close, or it certainly betrays my ignorance of, Norwegian, right? But you're saying that was actually here in Norway. I'm guessing you're referring to the interview that I mentioned, the press interview with kids, perhaps. Frederick is reminding us that Queen Elizabeth, at her epic age, also gave a remarkable speech. A lot, to be said here about women's leadership rising to really, rising to the occasion, right, in a moment like this. Raghu, we got to start wrapping up. While it breaks my heart, the saving grace for me is that I am so keen and looking forward to having you be back, in this show. And so before I start having us get to closure, I want to share one more thing, which is, bear with me 1 second. I think this will be it. So this is Raghu's blog in LinkedIn. I think, Raghu, this is your most recent blog, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're writing here about when working from home becomes living at work. I think there are more ideas and thoughts and insights here on the themes and topics that we are talking about. So I would encourage us to look at that, right? You just have to Google Raghu's name and LinkedIn, and you should be able to get to that. Raghu, if we were to summarize, the themes that we've evoked here, right? So what would those be? At a high level, we talk about how many different challenges. It's a perfect storm. So many different dimensions of life coming together: home, school, work, health, financial crisis, economic uncertainty, etc. And given that, what are some of the most important things you have to keep in mind about people? So if you had to summarize that, what would you say, the 3 or 4 key themes are from what we talked about today?
I think, let me hazard a guess here based on what the conversation took place over the last 1 hour. First is, I think, let's make sure that we start with the question, not with the answer, because we really don't have a playbook. But having said that, when you don't have a playbook, you need to go within yourself, to go deep within yourself to figure things out. We are not in a mode of finding things out. We are in a mode of figuring things out. And I think when you do that, you have to keep the heart and the head together. That's one important message I would leave us with. The second thing is homework, working from home and working from office are 2 different things. Don't mix the 2. Understand the implications of it and make sure that we create and facilitate the possibilities of optimizing in both senses, working from home and working from office in new ways, because out of this tough period comes creativity and new thoughts and new ideas. We can learn from the moment. I think on home working and on office working, we can do that. I think the third thing is keep in mind, these are times when you have to make really tough calls. But are you doing it with grace? Are you doing it with finesse? Are you elevating people as you go through the journey, or are you pulling them back? Are you optimizing for their skills, or are you making them give their best is another question I would leave with the people. I think finally, we need to keep in mind that out of this phase comes a new phase, and then there will be a new world coming out of this. And I hope we will remember what we went through and not lose the social solidarity, right? I'm going to give you one example, one story. I saw day for yesterday a 6-year-old and a grandmother who was in her 80s. The story was that these two go to the post boxes in the local area every day. And what they do, the pickup or the drop for the post is 11 o'clock in the morning. At 10:30, they go and religiously clean the post boxes because they want to sanitize the post boxes before the postal worker comes and delivers the post. And what they are saying is, this is how I can make a little bit of a difference in the life of the postal worker. If each of us carry that same sentiment as the 6-year-old, I think we can collectively make a better humanity. And that's our aspiration. At the end of the day, what we have learned during these times is the fact that collectively, we are trying to figure things out. We are trying to make meaning, and we are better off for it, with it. And hopefully that stays. We don't forget it.
Yeah, thank you, Raghu. That's a very inspiring, coda, as a thought. Michael is saying, I hope that there will be a new world, not going back to the way that things were. This is the only way for the human race to survive. And just to build on that last theme of what you've said, because yes, you're right. There's so many deeper and more tactical insights that we've just talked about around meaning making and around sensitization to employee situations at home, etc. But Raghu, this last point that you're making, don't you think that it's quite amazing, right? The speed and the discipline with which humanity has changed some of its habits, both at the individual level, the organizational level, the national level, and the global level, right? It was so hard to tell our kids to stay at home. It was so hard to resist, like going out to the bars every Friday, right? It was so hard to wash our hands all the time, right? And suddenly humanity is towing that line. We're all washing our hands. We're, okay, you want to maintain social distancing, I'll do that. You want me to stay at home, I'll do that. I'll do anything to get coronavirus out of my hair, right? And then, of course, collectively, right? Organizations, the kind of transformations and transitions, etc., they've been able to make in the working conditions and how they're working, etc., redeploying the workforce, like you said, with Virgin, doesn't, like, for somebody who has helped build and support humongous bureaucracies in large organizations, which just like inevitably seem to be the need when you grow that large. Don't you see this as like almost like a fresh new wind that is blowing through society, invoking and waking us up to the, like, guys, we can change and transform and get things done much faster than what the red tape is all about in the past?
For me, that's the only way we can pay homage to people who have sacrificed their lives during this moment, by being better for the future stakeholders, our children. So you're absolutely right. As we go through changes, and as we are willing to change overnight, it's a testimony to human resilience, but it's also a tribute to people who are giving their lives up during this moment, right? But also, what can we do to leave the world better for our children today? At an organizational level, at a national level, at an individual level. That's the story of the 6-year-old and the grandmother teaching the 6-year-old that I can leave a world that is better for you, and you can join and participate in that. For me, listen, at this point in time, what I want to say is there is a new sense of love. There is a new sense of community. There is a new sense of purpose and meaning that we hope we never lose. Against the bleakness of what we are going through, there is a rainbow of possibilities. And that's the rainbow we need to aspire to catch.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I'm sure my production team is capturing that and putting that up here very soon, because again, this is Raghu, not just the executive, it's Raghu the poet. Raghu, that's such a beautiful note to end this conversation with you. I want to keep our viewers on for just 3 more minutes to talk to you about what's coming next, over the next 2 weeks. But, we should give you, time to rest and reconnect with family, Raghu. So a big heartfelt, expression of gratitude from all of us for making the time, sharing your heart, your spirit, your thought, your experience with us today. And we very much look forward to having you back with us, Raghu. Thank you. Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you all for making the time to enjoy this really beautiful moment with Raghu. I want to talk to you about what's coming next. As you know, this is just the second edition of a webcast that I hope to do for the foreseeable future now, every Thursday at 11 a.m. East Coast time. One thing I just want to encourage you as best you can to spread the word. If this is something that you find of value, of service, then whoever you think in your community might enjoy it, one simple way is just to share it on the appropriate social media platform. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, we're live on all 3 of them. We will be on LinkedIn as well next time. If you have not received a special kind of email, from me to invite you for this, then if you want to keep on top of sort of this and also want to get some of our latest thinking, articles, writing as I'm doing, on these topics, one of them, for example, in the next few days that I'm going to publish is on, how to really cope with the fear of death, which is very salient and very active at a time like this. How to make hard decisions and tap your intuition more, as a follow-up to a virtual class that we did some time back. A story from Anton Chekhov, this Russian writer, which I adapted, for the present time, because it's just a beautiful story with a beautiful, timeless lesson, and with a little bit of adaptation can really mean a lot to us. These are the kinds of things that you'll be seeing in my newsletter. So if you were to go to hitendra.com, if you haven't already, then you can sign up for that newsletter there, and that way we can be more in touch. Now, let me just tell you to close out the 2 things that we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. Next Thursday, we are going to be focusing on personal journeys. This is a project I started at Columbia Business School with my MBAs and executive MBAs about 11 years ago. It has, for me, been a tremendously inspiring and humbling experience to create just certain conditions in which each of us can activate the hero within. And there are incredibly powerful personal journeys that we have gone on, that people that we know, like our caregivers, our parents, our grandparents, our brothers and sisters, our friends, our bosses at work. There's someone we know and sometimes that's us, who has risen from the ashes, gone on like a remarkable quest, created, the conditions for the success of a lot of people, etc. Right? And so these are what I call personal journeys, moments which are about 3 to 4 minutes long, stories that are coming from a place of heartfelt connection for each of us, and that are a contribution and a sharing that we can use to uplift our community. So that in addition to the Gandhis and the Lincolns and the Eleanor Roosevelts, and the Mother Teresas, we can actually learn and gain inspiration from the hero in every block. All right. That's the conversation that we are going to have next Thursday. I'm hoping through that to invoke your own participation and contribution. I will share how to do that in that conversation. I will offer up some tools for how to become even more impactful as a storyteller, something that is otherwise so innate and natural to humanity. We'll talk more about that next Thursday. And then the Thursday after that is another very joyous opportunity for us to connect with, as Joel, I think you brought up in your comment a few minutes ago, you said, could we have conversations with some women, leaders as well? And so let me just going to share this with you. In the year 2000, Gallup ran a poll in the United States asking Americans who was the most admired person for them over the last 100 years. The century was coming to an end. Do you know who that person was? Can you take a guess? The person that was, voted by Americans as the most admired person over the last 100 years. This person started an organization which today is in about 125 countries, 130 countries, has a loyal employee group of about 4,500, doing noble, really great work in society. Do you know who I'm talking about? Just think about it. I'm going to bring him up right now. Not Oprah, not Bill Gates. Kalpana got it. It's Mother Teresa, the lady here on the right. And we will, 2 Thursdays from now, have the distinct joy, privilege, and honor to bring into our midst Jan Petrie. Jan is a source of tremendous inspiration to me and also a dear friend. And she has herself had the honor of working in close proximity with Mother Teresa, going back many decades, when she first started to build that relationship along with her sister in making a movie on Mother Teresa, a documentary where Mother Teresa allowed them to have some very privileged access to her life, her thoughts, her everyday moments, her challenges, her explorations of advancing her work across different parts of the world. And Jan and her filming team, along with her sister, flew to all these different parts of the world. This is a DVD that you can actually get on Amazon. It is an incredibly powerful testament to the life of this incredible human being, incredible leader, incredible saint, Mother Teresa. And Jan is now working on another project to actually document and put together a priceless asset of this set of videos that capture Mother Teresa in action, or as Mother Teresa would like to say, love in action. And in her time making the film, Jan ended up also moving beyond the film to actually serving the work that Mother Teresa was doing in a very privileged capacity of being very close in that role of serving the work to times when she was traveling and supporting this great saint. And therefore, I cannot think of someone more suited to have us explore how would a great leader of the past have responded to the present moment. If Mother Teresa was with us today, what would she have said? What would she have thought? How would she have guided us to put love into action? I think, there's just so many profound possibilities of what we can learn about that. And we're going to have that great honor and joy of having Jan in our midst to, just speculate using her best judgment as to what that might look like. She is an incredibly humble, joyous, loving, articulate, attuned human being. And I think that my greatest joy is going to be to share the joy I get from spending time in Jan's presence with all of you. something I've dreamed of for a while. And now that we have this webcast platform, we'll have the opportunity to do it. So wait for that. That's going to come 2 weeks from now. I think you guys are all going to be, thrilled with that outcome as well. All right. So thank you for staying the course. I'm deeply grateful that all of you have joined us, for this moment today. Look forward to having you back, and Godspeed. You take care. Namaste. Bye-bye.